السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله والحمد لله حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه حمدا يليق بجلال وجهه وبعظيم سلطانه وصلى الله على خير خلقه محمد الصادق الأمين المبعوث رحمة للعالمين وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين اللهم اكتبنا منهم آمين. اللهم افتح مسامع قلوبنا لذكرك اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. We praise and glorify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as He deserves, and we send peace and blessings on the best of His creation, our beloved Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam and His noble family. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to open our hearts to the proper understanding of His kalam. Today we are going to be covering Surah Yusuf, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has called Ahsan al-Qasas, the best of narrations, the best of stories, which means that in this story there are innumerable lessons. And we don't study Surah Yusuf because it makes a nice story, which has got intrigue and it's got romance and it's got plotting and all of those things and a happy ending. That's not why we study Surah Yusuf. Imam Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawziyah said that from Surah Yusuf I learned 1,000 lessons. So we are going to tackle Surah Yusuf with lessons which you will come up with. And after every session, and there may be 10, 15 sessions, I don't know how many to cover this, you will compile all those lessons and see how much we come up with. Inshallah. So there is work for everybody. This is not a freebie surah like many people treat it. They come, they listen, eat and go. You have work to do. So from each one you will be deriving lessons. Sometimes there are lessons just in a single word. Forget about one ayah. So we will try and derive as many lessons from this Ahsan al-Qasas as we can. Inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala open our hearts to that. Ameen. As most of you know, Surah Yusuf is a Meccan surah revealed in the late Meccan period. Most people are of the opinion that it was revealed around the 11th year of prophethood, which would be about 2 years before the Hijrah. Now it's interesting that the surah was revealed at a time where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had just gone through the most challenging periods of his entire life. So much so that the 10th year of his prophethood is known as Amul Huzn, the year of sadness, of sorrow. Now, sorrow is a normal human emotion for people like us and everyone else. But imagine a person who knows the reality, the haqiqah of everything, who knows Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala better than anyone else, and he himself felt sorrow. That's his humanity, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So why is it called the Amul Huzn? Because in this year, his most beloved companion, our mother, Sayyidah Khadija radiyallahu anha wa ardaha, left this dunya for her Lord. Which means that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam lost the anchor, the inner support that he had inside his house. And if you remember right from the beginning of the prophethood, when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam encountered Jibreel alayhi salam and Iqra was revealed, he was very distressed and he came home, Zammiluni, Zammiluni, if you remember, cover me, cover me. And who was it that comforted him and reassured him? Our mother, Khadija radiallahu anha, the best of women. So imagine, and they had a wonderful marriage. During her lifetime, he was only married to one woman. All the other 11 came after her. All of his children, all of his surviving children came from Sayyidah Khadija. And that's also miraculous in a way that she was 40 years old when he married her. And she gave him 6 children, of which the 4 daughters, radiallahu anhunna, survived. Of all the others, and they were young, only one child was born, which is Ibrahim, to Maria. No other children. And there are lots of other things about her, that she sacrificed everything she had. And she was a powerful woman, and she was a beautiful woman, and she was from the most noble lineage, and she was very wise, and she was strong. So that was such a great support for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Anytime he was in distress, he would come home and he would have that. So he lost that support. And within like 6 weeks or so, his external support was also gone, which is his beloved uncle Abu Talib, the father of Sayyidina Ali and Ja'far radiallahu anhu, who was the leader of the Hashim clan, and because of whose seniority and recognition, the enemies among the Quraysh, the leaders, dared not attack Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam directly. And as we know, he did not accept Islam because of whatever reason Allah had decreed. But when they went for 3 years, they were in the desert when they were boycotted. They were thrown out of Mecca. Abu Talib was not thrown out. Yet voluntarily he said, if my nephew is in the desert, I will go and live with him. So this is who he lost, the external support in the community. Then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's persecution increased, and he decided to go to Taif. And those of you who have been fortunate to visit Taif, it's not just any journey. First, you go through the desert for about 50 miles. Then there are mountains to climb, which the cars have difficulty navigating. And he went up there with Zayd bin Haritha. And there he stayed for 10 days inviting people to Islam, and everyone rejected him. Finally, they unleashed the children and the rogues to stone him. And it said for about 3 miles he was stoned, and he was bloody, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, to the extent that his sandals were stuck to his feet from the clotted blood. And then he collapsed in that garden which some of us visited, where that man Addas came with grapes. He had gone through that. And now he is returning to Mecca, and he knows there is no protection there, there is no protection here. What was that day of Taif like? As you know, in the Medina period, in the battle of Uhud, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was injured. Part of his helmet was stuck on his face. There was a slash on his noble mouth. One of his teeth was injured. And our mother Aisha radiallahu anha many years later said, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, was there any day that was more difficult for you than the day of Uhud? And right away he said, yes, the day of Taif. So just imagine all of these things had piled up, Amul Huzn. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam felt sort of as a human being in a state of, I don't want to say depression, but he felt emotionally at a low, at an ebb, in need of support. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was supported by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who witnessed all of these things and let him go through all of these things by revealing Surah Yusuf. Because in Surah Yusuf, there is so much encouragement and lessons that it would be emotionally and spiritually uplifting to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So in a way, it was a divine gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a reassurance that no matter how bad things look, in the end, the truth will prevail. That Allah's help will always be with the ones He loves, the ones He chooses. And that's the whole summary of Surah Yusuf, the challenges that this young boy from the age of 7 goes through. All kinds of challenges. Internal, from his own family, his loved ones, from external, and so on and so forth. So, there are lots of ingredients, lessons to lift the spirit of anybody who's in a state of despair and distress. So, one lesson for us is, as human beings, if we are going through challenging times and we are feeling down, we should read Surah Yusuf and reflect on its lessons. To me, Surah Yusuf represents a light. All of the Quran is a light. But a light that shines through the darkness that we encounter from time to time in our lives, the challenges. And Surah Yusuf is a promise of a new day. After the darkest hour of the night comes the dawn. So when you're going through that, just remember that that night is going to end. That period of inna ma'al usri yusra, it will end. And this is a surah that reminds us that, look, anytime you go through, am I going through as much trial as Yusuf alayhi salam did? And therefore, why am I complaining? It too shall end. Because that's the nature of life in this dimension, in this dunya. Nothing lasts forever. Good times come to an end, and bad times come to an end. So, remember that. Also, sometimes there's more than one reason for revelation. Some of the Jews from Yathrib, which is later to become Medina, where the Jewish tribes were the 3 major tribes there, had heard about this man who claimed to be a prophet or a messenger, and they were talking to their pagan, the Quraysh, trying to prove that he was an impostor. And if you remember the last surah that we had covered, which was Surah Kahf, they had presented certain questions. Ask him about this, ask him about the one who went from east to west, ask him about the people of the cave, ask him about the Ruh. And on this occasion, they said, ask him, because only a messenger would have an answer to this. Ask him the story of Yusuf and his brothers, and how is it that the Bani Israel ended up in Egypt in captivity. Because this half of that story was unknown to the Arabs, the Quraysh. They had no libraries, they had no books, they had no Jews living there where they could see the history of the Jewish nation and all of that. Okay. So ask him. So in an open public forum, one Qurayshite comes and said to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, tell us the story of Yusuf and his brothers and how the Bani Israel ended up in Egypt. Did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam know it? The answer is no. So he said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I will wait for revelation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed Surah Yusuf. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in that public forum, it doesn't say whether it was in front of the Kaaba or wherever it was, he sallallahu alaihi wasallam recited the entire Surah Yusuf with all of its detail from the beginning to the end. The first two verses were revealed later and added to the front. The whole thing, and everybody was flabbergasted. First of all, the details of the story. Number two, the eloquence of the language. So the Jewish people who were there, who instigated this, heard this, and they quietly slipped out and left Mecca. Even then they did not accept Islam. And some of the Mufassirun have said that around the time, because the persecution was so bad, some of the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had also told him, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, tell us stories of previous prophets who had gone through suffering, so that it would help us it would encourage us and strengthen us. So some have said that that is another reason why this, in Allah's wisdom, was revealed at that time. Now, this surah is unique in many different ways. One is that there are many stories in the Quran, and they are short stories, 1 ayah, 2 ayah, 3 ayah, and they are scattered throughout. The Musa alayhi salam story appears in 5 or 6 different places. Ibrahim alayhi salam stories comes different. Adam alayhi salam story, they are scattered all over. The story of Yusuf alayhi salam occurs only once in the Quran. And it's not 1 or 2 ayahs. Page after page, there is no other story that is as long and as detailed and as chronologically arranged as Surah Yusuf, this narrative, in the entire Quran. And the whole story is collected here and is mentioned only in one place. And therefore it is the single longest chapter, surah, with only one storyline and one theme. In the entire Quran, there are only 2 other mentions of Surah Yusuf, and it's in passing. Nothing about the story. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَلَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ يُوسُفْ مِنْ قَبْلُ بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ. The man of the believer of Musa alayhi salam, when he's making a case for them not to kill Musa alayhi salam, he's telling Pharaoh that you don't remember that Yusuf came before with the signs, centuries before. Between Musa alayhi salam and Yusuf alayhi salam, there are hundreds, thousands of years. Okay, so that's one mention, and there is another mention in Surah An'am, just among the prophets, that وَمِن ذُرِّيَّتِهِ دَاوُودُ وَسُلَيْمَانُ وَأَيُّوبُ وَيُوسُفُ وَمُوسَى وَهَارُونَ وَكَذَلِكَ نَجْزِي الْمُحْسِنِينَ. That just his name is mentioned. That's the only mention. Yet in the whole surah, it's all about him. Our story is important. If you want to catch anybody's attention and you keep them from sleeping, tell them a story. Children want to hear stories before they go to bed. Adults want to, if you want people to listen to your khutbah on Jummah, you start with a story. You'll catch their attention. Because that's human nature. They want to be able to relate to something. So, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the stories, and this story, as we know, is also mentioned in the previous scriptures in Genesis in the Old Testament. There are some differences, and if in the end of, once we finish it, we can go over that. I don't want to go into that. And there are many different trials that come in this story. What are the different trials? Let's just quickly go through some of those that they come. Fitna of?
There are many of them.
Just count a few. Fitna of jealousy, the fitna of beauty, of being beautiful is the fitna itself. What else?
Sexual desires.
Desires. What else?
Acquisition.
Jealousy.
That's the family dynamics, jealousies, and all of those. adversities, being put in prison, right? Slavery, being sold, being thrown in a well, almost the attempt of being killed, originally planning to kill him. So there are many, many situations. And the fitna of separation of a loved one. Now imagine someone who is very beloved and they disappear. And there is no closure on the case. Here we talk about closures. When there are a lot of missing children, and 2 years, 5 years, 10 years go by, and sometimes the parents say, you know what? I wish I could have confirmation that someone had died. Then it would put a closure. But there's no closure in this case. For 40 some years, separation. Someone has reflected, and this is just a reflection, that Dawood alayhi salam Yaqub alayhi salam loved Yusuf alayhi salam so much that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decided that I will separate you. Because maybe that love was almost at the level it wouldn't be, because he was a prophet, competing with his love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he said, separate. This is just somebody's reflection. Also, if you look from the spiritual perspective, from the metaphysical, the separation of the human soul from the divine. When we get separated from our origin, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in our dunya, we will suffer like Yusuf alayhi salam and Yaqub alayhi salam suffered from the separation of each other. Because this is the story of the lover and the beloved. And we're not talking about Zulaikha and Yusuf, we are talking about Yaqub alayhi salam and Yusuf alayhi salam. Continuing a little bit more with the introduction to the surah, just because there are some youngsters also, we should know about the lineage of Yusuf alayhi salam. Does everybody know the lineage of Yusuf alayhi salam? That it all starts, the story starts with who? Our father, Ibrahim alayhi salam, Khalilullah, the father of all the monotheistic faiths. Ibrahim alayhi salam had no children till the age of almost 100 years old, according to biblical tradition. And biblical tradition, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam permitted us to narrate from the Israeliyat, but he says don't deny them, but don't believe them as being absolute truth. So in their version, 86 is when he had his first son, whose name was Ismail. And Ismail was born from our mother Hajar, who was a bond servant or bond slave of Ibrahim alayhi salam. So the firstborn was Ismail alayhi salam. And then according to, again, the Bible, Genesis, Ishaq alayhi salam was born to the same wife who had been barren for 80 years when he was 100 years old. So there was a 14-year age difference between Ismail alayhi salam and Ishaq alayhi salam. And from Ismail alayhi salam, and we know Ismail alayhi salam and his mother Hajar alayhi salam were left in the barren valley of Bakka with nothing. And from that lineage, no prophets came till the final messenger, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Bible also says, he says to Ishaq, and from you I will make a great nation. And I have favored you above, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I favored them. He favored the Bani Ishaq with prophet after prophet after prophet. All of the prophets of Bani Israel came. Sometimes 2 and 3 at a time. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that one used to die and the next one would come. Now that's a great favor. But if you look at it from the other side, what does it indicate?
Something final is coming.
Rebellion. They could not be left alone without having a prophet with them at all times. So all of the prophets are from the lineage of Ishaq alayhi salam. And the son of Ishaq alayhi salam was who? Yaqub alayhi salam. And the son of Yaqub alayhi salam, there were 12, of whom was Yusuf alayhi salam. And later on, some form of prophethood were given to the other 11 after they rectified themselves, and they are mentioned in the Quran as asbat. Musa wa Harun, Isa wa Ayyub wa Yunus, wal asbat. The other 11 were given some form of prophethood. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was once asked that who is the noblest of people? He said, the one who has most taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the man who was asking said, that's not what I meant. So he said, if you are talking in terms of lineage, then Yusuf, the son of a Nabi, the son of a Nabi, the son of Khalilullah. So this is the lineage of Yusuf alayhi salam. Son of Yaqub, son of Ishaq, son of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And that will be mentioned here. Lineage is important, but Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam also said that the one who is held back because of his deeds will not be moved forward because of his lineage. That, oh, I am Sayyid I am the Ashraf from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But my amal are zero or negative. It's not good enough. He said, Ya Fatima, don't count on the fact that you are my daughter. Of course, he also gave Bashara that she is the Sayyidah of the Nisa'ul Jannah. But to teach us, he is telling her, don't depend on the fact that you are my daughter. Your deeds, your deeds, your deeds. So, but this is the lineage. People come from a noble lineage are expected to be noble and behave nobly. Carry that lineage. Any questions so far? Now we can start the surah. Any comments? Anybody wants to add anything?
I just want to know, Yaqub, he had 12 sons or 12 children?
12 sons.
Sons.
12
And
sons.
all of them were prophet.
No.
From one line.
No.
Tell me one.
According to the Bible, 2 wives and 2
Two lines.
handmaids.
4.
Two.
So, the mother of Yusuf alayhi salam was the 11th son, second youngest. Yeah. And he had a younger brother whose name is given as Binyamin according to the Israelites. Not mentioned in the Quran, just his brothers are mentioned. So it is said according to that, and like we said, we don't deny that we don't say it's wrong, and we don't say it's confirmed, that these 2, the last 2, were born from a different mother than some of the others. And the Bible calls her as Rachel, or Rachel. Rachel. And it is said that Rachel, alayhi salam, died in childbirth, giving birth to Binyamin. So the 2 youngest had essentially no mother. So that may have been one other reason why Yaqub alayhi salam was extra protective of them. And it is said according to them that Yaqub alayhi salam then married Rachel's sister, and she raised the 2 younger ones. So that's what we have, and again, that's may be true, may not be true. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألف لام را تلك آيات الكتاب المبين إنا أنزلناه قرآنا عربيا لعلكم تعقلون نحن نقص عليك أحسن القصص بما أوحينا إليك هذا القرآن وإن كنت من قبله لمن الغافلين إذ قال يوسف لأبيه يا أبت إني رأيت 11 كوكبا والشمس والقمر رأيتهم لي ساجدين قال يا بني لا تقصص رؤياك على إخوتك فيكيد لك كيدا إن الشيطان للإنسان عدو مبين صدق الله العظيم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts this surah with the 3 disconnected letters which are called what? Huruful muqatti'at, the letters that are cut separated. They alif lam ra makes no sense. And as we know, we have studied before, how many surahs start with this? When we were studying Surah Yasin, how many huruful muqatta'at are there? How many? Alif lam mim ra ya sin sad ha mim qaf ain sin. You remember? We've gone through this. How many alphabets in the Arabic language? 29 actually.
29.
And 14 are the huruf al-muqatta'at. And here we have Alif Lam Ra. This is the third of a series of Alif Lam Ra surahs. It starts with Surah Yunus, starts with Alif Lam Ra. Then Surah Hud. Then this is the third one. Then after that, there will be 3 more, which we will talk about in a few minutes. I think I shouldn't even ask this question. How do we remember these huruf al-muqatta'at? We gave you that one scholar had put them together in one sentence. What was it? Nassun hakimun qati'un lahu sir. Nas, text, a wise, decisive text, full of wonderful secrets. Ibn Kathir said that. So if you take that, Nas, if you put those together, those are the 14 alphabets. And it makes sense. Nas means text. Hakimun, wise, which is the Quran. Qati'un, which is decisive. Lahu sir, in which there is secret, because there is a secret behind these that nobody knows for sure. Okay. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Alif Lam Ra, Tilka Ayatul Kitab al Mubin. These are the verses of a clear book. Clear book. The clear book. Al Kitab. Does anybody remember what we said about these huruf al-muqatta'at? Again, we have to review it because we forget. What are they? Safest is to say what? Correct opinion? The reality, the absolute truth about it is known only to Allah. And then we've said that people have reflected on it. Some have said these are names of Allah, how they start, Alif for Allah, Lam for Latif, and Mim for, Muhaymin, and so on and so forth. And then also, we said that whenever these alphabets occur in the Quran, what comes right after that in the ayah? Alif Lam Mim, Dhalikal Kitab. Alif Lam Mim. Always a mention of the Quran. Something to do with the Quran comes in that ayah or the next ayah or the next two ayahs. Except Surah Rum, in which it comes indirectly, and we went over that, and I'm not going to go over that again. Every time it comes, these alphabets, and then a mention of the Quran. As if to say that the Quran is made up of these alphabets. Here they are. I'm giving you half of them, 14. Go ahead. It's a challenge. There are ayats in the Quran that challenge the people who don't believe. Take the same ingredients, take these alphabets, and produce a book like this. Take these alphabets, produce 10 surahs like this. That's an ayah of the Quran. Then it comes, produce one surah like it, or 10 ayats like it. And that has never been done. So this is to show the divinity, the divine origin of this book. That here it is made up of these alphabets. And also to make us humble. That you start the Quran by saying, I don't know. And whenever we start the Quran, I don't know, I don't come into the Quran arrogantly that, oh, I know. If I come in with a full cup, I'm not going to collect anything. I come in with an empty cup. Allah reminds us to be humble by saying, I don't know. What the Quran starts with Alif Lam Mim. I have no clue really what this is. So Allah, teach me. Teach me. I don't know. Tilka ayatul kitab al-mubin. Tilka is an article of ishara, directing. Like you said, this. Okay. Tilka is a feminine ishara. Ishara to something that has a feminine gender. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says for the Dhalikal Kitab, that's an ishara. This is the book. Now that's masculine. Dhalika, the female of that is Tilka. Because the ayah, the word ayah, is a feminine gender. So Tilka ayat. The only thing about this is Dhalika and Tilka are different than Hada and Hadihi. When you're saying this, which is near, if it's masculine, you say Hada, or you say, if it's feminine, you say Hadihi. This is saying Dhalikal Kitab, Tilka ayat. This is of indicator something that's far. Yet the Quran is with us to indicate that its majesty, that it's elevated and it came from on high. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using those letters that indicate distance, that this is something grand, it's coming from above. ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابِ تِلْكَ آيَاتٍ. So that we learn to treat every word and the whole book with respect and honor and ta'zeem. And that's why in our culture, at least mostly in the Indians, Pakistani subcontinent, Bangladesh, we always keep the Quran on top. You know, we shouldn't touch the Quran without wudu. This is ta'zeem because this is the words of Allah. And we know this is called Kalamullah. The Quran is Kalamullah. Allah spoke these words. Jibreel alayhi salam heard these words. Jibreel alayhi salam spoke these words. Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam heard these words. He sallallahu alayhi wasallam spoke these words. That is what the Quran is. Quran means the recitation. It did not come as a book. Yet here it is said, Kitab, al-Kitabul Mubin. Because it was compiled, going to be compiled into a book. So it's a written form and a recited form, which is the same. Okay. But it did not descend as a book. It wasn't a book that came down on the mountains and the mountains collapsed. It came down as a verbal, as a recitation. That is why spoken, it's the Quran. Written, it's the book, Al-Kitab or Mushaf as we call it. Now the word, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses most commonly for the Quran, either calls it Al-Kitab or he calls it Quran. He also calls it Al-Dhikr, and there are other names for it. But the most commonly used is Al-Kitab, which appears in the Quran 77 times. Al-Kitab. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, Tilka, honor these words. Ayat, in English we call them verses, but ayah has multiple meanings. What are they? Ayah is a sign. So everything that you see, each one of you is a sign of some higher power that created you. The sun is a sign, the moon is a sign, the weather changes are a sign. If you want to call them miracles, ayah is like a miracle. And the entire Quran is a miracle, therefore every ayah is a miracle. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said what? My miracle, my mu'ajiza is Al-Quran. It is eternal. Therefore every ayah of it is a sign. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Tilka ayat. These ayat are what? Kitabul Mubin. From the Quran, Mubin, something that is bayyan, that means something that's very clear. What does it mean it's clear? If it's that clear, why are we sitting here and having this session? Jazakallah khair. That is one understanding. That it is clearly a divine revelation. It has not come from any source. And this makes sense here for Surah Yusuf because they were challenging them that he is a poet. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Tilka ayatul kitab al-mubin. These are the verses, Surah Yusuf that's going to follow and everything else. Kitab, a book that is clear, there's no doubt that it is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the proof was presented because someone who had no knowledge of this then comes out and recites the whole surah. It's also clear that there is a very clear message in the Quran, the message of Tawheed, the message of Akhirah, of accountability, of right and wrong. And for that, you can even read the translations and you will get the meaning, whether it's in Urdu or English or Bangla or any language. You get the message, which is clear. Now, if you want to go into a detailed study, then you need the Arabic language and you need some scholarship of what people have said. But as a basic thing for a Bedouin or for a farmer or somebody who's not a PhD, the Quran has a very clear message. Worship one God. Don't associate any partners with him. Follow my messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You will come to meet me. Every soul will meet death. There is a day of judgment. There is Nar, there is Jannah. I have sent angels. This is what has happened before. The message is very clear. Right? Details, you want more? Then, yes, there is the study of the Quran. That's where the Tafsir come in. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the word Ayah. And elsewhere Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has also mentioned in the Quran the word Surah. That means these divisions of the Quran are also divine. It's not somebody said, okay, let's end the sentence here, make this one ayah. Allah said these are ayat. Who determined they are the ayat? Allah. Who determined they are the surahs? Allah. This ends here. This is where it is. And it was given to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In fact, some of them came later and put it in this surah in this place. So the order is also divine. The division into ayats and surah are all divine because Allah has used the word ayah and surah in the Quran. So it's not something that was added afterwards. Some of the critics of the Quran who try to prove it wrong, they divided into the longest in the beginning and the shortest in the end, and they put this and they put everything is there because even the word ayah and surah are in the Quran. Inna anzalnahu Qur'anan Arabiya. Next ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the word Qur'an. He said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, indeed, we have sent it down.
10 or 15? Okay, but it's a long one,
Can
no?
you please mute all your people online? Can you please mute your mics? Jazakumullah khairan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, indeed, we have sent it down Qur'anan Arabiya. Quran in the Arabic language, an Arabic Quran, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ, so that you may understand. Inna, we have. Let me ask the youngster, there's two young ladies sitting there. Allah saying, we have. We just said Allah is one, right? Why are we using a plural? We sent it down. Shouldn't it be I sent it down? What do you say?
I'd assume because he sent it through the prophets and the angels. That's what he means.
Good. Any other? Adults can also come in.
With respect
So there is
majesty.
there is a plural of number and there is a plural of majesty. You know, even the Queen of England, the former queen, whenever they made a declaration, we, they would use plural of majesty. It's not of number. So this is to show who it is. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has used the plural of majesty. It doesn't mean there is more than one God. Okay? Na'udhu billah. Also, there is an opinion of Imam Ibn Taymiyyah. He said that whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the word nahnu or the plural of we, it has always to do with something in which the angels are involved, like bringing the Quran down, like bringing the rain down, like doing this and that. So his opinion was that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says we, means Allah's command carried out by the angels. So close to what he said. That's another valid opinion. Anzalnahu. What is the meaning of nazala or anzala? Something that comes from above, descends. Okay. That means it came from above. But the Quran also uses the word nazzala. What is the difference between nazzala and anzala? Nazzala is done over a period of time. And as we know, the Quran was revealed over 23 years. So portions came at a time. Anzala means all of it at one time. Now, we know it came over 23 years, yet Allah is saying, Anzalnahu. We sent it down all at once. Did that happen? Inna anzalnahu fi laylatil qadr. There you go. Yes, it was sent all at one time from Lawh Mahfuz to the first heaven on the night of Laylatul Qadr. That was the Anzalnahu. And from there, Nazzala, over a period of time, 23 years, it came down to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Is that clear? All of it was sent to the first heaven on Laylatul Qadr. And then from there, it all didn't come down at once, it came down over a period of 23 years. So now we have mention of Kitab, the written script, and Quran, the recited. Arabiyan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specifies that He revealed it in the Arabic language. What does that mean to you? I mean, we all know that, but what does it mean? He didn't have to say it because anybody reads the Quran, we know it's in Arabic language, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said it more than once. Well, you could say, logically, if you said, well, it was sent to an Arabic speaking messenger, to the people who spoke Arabic, so it had to be in Arabic, it couldn't be in Latin or Sanskrit, right? So one is that it was sent to an Arab prophet and to Arab people. But it is one of the Semitic languages. Hebrew, Aramaic, all of these are considered Semitic languages. And of all the Semitic languages, the most sophisticated and most eloquent, with all of those glorious rules of grammar that we all struggle with, is the Arabic language. It is very, very precise and it is very eloquent. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honored the Arabic language by sending, all the languages belong to Him, but He chose the Arabic language to convey His final message, the one that He preserves. So which is also telling us what is the lesson in this? Is knowing the Quran fard or not? And the rule in our deen is whatever is fard, whatever leads to it is also fard. Which means each one of us has a duty to have some working knowledge of the Arabic language. That's the lesson. And it's never too late. Right? Never too late. So we need to appreciate the kalam of Allah, not through translators, because that's human words. We have to have some knowledge of the Arabic language or study it, inshallah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned it. Now somebody might say, Allah says Arabic Quran, but I have heard people say that certain words, that this is not an Arabic word, yet it's in the Quran. It had its origin in Farsi. It had its origin in Sanskrit even, in Latin. The word story in English, stories, in Arabic is asatirul awwalin. Asatir, story. You see the commonality of those words? So what happened is, yes, there were words. When languages people interact, they borrow words from each other. Okay. In Urdu we have English words. In English we have Urdu words. Khaki. Khakis. You're wearing khakis. Right? And many other words. So, and then they become part of that language. So yes, there are some words, there are about 250 words in the Quran that may have had a foreign language origin, but their equivalent in Arabic is what is in the Quran. So that's just an aside. Quran and Arabiya. لَعَلَّكُمْ, so that you may تَعْقِلُونَ, especially addressed to the Quraysh, that you are the masters of this language. They were the masters of this language. Allah said, I have sent it down in the language that you understand, that you have mastery in poetry and so on and so forth, eloquence. You should be able to appreciate this. And they did. There are so many stories of 3 of the leaders, Abu Jahl and 2 others. Remember? One night, they came near the Kaaba. They were in the night because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was there reciting the Quran, and they were all out there because the beauty of the recitation of the kalam of Allah was so attractive to them that they came to listen to this eloquent, because they had hearts who could appreciate the language. And then Abu Jahl sees this. What are you doing? He says, what are you doing? He said, I came to listen. He said, I came to listen. He said, this looks very bad for us. We are denying him. So now we make a promise to each other. We will not come back and listen to him, because if we get caught here by others, then we lose against him. So next night, one of them thinks that the other 2 are not coming. Let me go and listen. The other one thinks the same way, and the third one. Next night, all 3 are there again. So you promised. He said, you promised. So the kalam, they appreciated the kalam. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, taqilun. You should use your aql. Now, there's another point here. What does it mean by you understand this message? If you understand this message truly, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ, if you understand, what would you do? You would believe it, you would follow it. You would follow it, right? That's what is called. That it's not just if you truly understood. Yeah, I understand the words. If you understood it, you would know that this is the truth. And therefore you would accept it, you would embrace it, you would believe in it, you would obey and follow it, and therefore you would benefit from it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking them to use their rational senses. Allah is not saying, just accept it. Use your aql. In many faiths, when people challenge, even in Christianity, when somebody asks to explain the Trinity, you know what they say? Don't ask the question, just believe in it. Means, just take it in your heart, this is the truth. Our deen says, yes, accept it in your heart, but rationalize it. Because it shouldn't be exclusive. If you rationalize it, you will find it to be the truth, and then it will be even have more impact on your heart. So it's aqli and qalbi. It's not just emotional. That I heard it, it's beautiful, therefore. No, it should also make sense. So our deen is both rational and emotional, because ultimately the hearts are involved in it. We love it. We love Allah. That's an emotion. It's not aql. Okay. So we have an aqli and now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts, because they asked about this narration, He says, Nahnu, again He uses the plural of majesty. We, naqussu alayka, we narrate to you this qissa, qasas. Qissa in Arabic means something walking in the footsteps, is where it comes from, the word qasas. We had this word in Surah Kahf, when Musa alayhi salam and Yusha alayhi salam, they returned. He said, oh, that's where we were. They walked back. Same word is used there. So why are stories called qissa or qasas in plural? Because we are walking in the footsteps of the people who lived that story. So we are reliving that story by walking in their footsteps. So when we go through this, we are walking in the footsteps of Yusuf alayhi salam, or Harun alayhi salam, or Musa alayhi salam. Okay. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, نَحْنُ نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ أَحْسَنَ الْقَصَصِ. We will narrate to you, Ya Rasulullah, alayka, second person singular, male, the best أحسن القصص. Now if you take this as a general meaning, that means Allah narrates in the Quran many qasas, many stories. Allah is saying every story of the Quran is a beautiful story. Nothing less than that is going to be in the Quran. The story of Musa alayhi salam is a beautiful story. The story of Dawud alayhi salam is a beautiful story. The story of Ibrahim alayhi salam is a beautiful story. That they are all beautiful stories because the style of storytelling in the Quran is not detailed. It is very unique. Yet it derives lessons from it. It gives you moral lessons. Okay. It doesn't burden you with details where you lose the moral, you get into details. Her name was Zulaykha, and she was maybe 40 years old, but she was very beautiful. Maybe the husband was impotent, maybe this, and did she end up finally, once they reconciled, did they get married? All those details, if you add, which you will find in the biblical stories, they make you lose focus on what the main lesson was. And the Quranic stories always are for lessons. They are not for storytelling. Okay? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is then saying, Ahsan al-Qasas, that they are all beautiful stories, but particularly this one, because in so much detail, which is coming now. نَحْنُ نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ أَحْسَنَ الْقَصَصِ بِمَا أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْكَ هَذَا الْقُرْآنِ. That just like we have revealed to you this Qur'an, that like it has come down, this story is coming to. وَإِن كُنْتَ مِن قَبْلِهِ لَمِنَ الْغَافِلِينَ. And you, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, before this was revealed, you were ghafil, you were unaware of this story. You didn't know anything about it. Okay. Ghafla has many meanings. One is being inattentive, heedless, unaware. didn't know. Now that ghafla can be something that you have no control over because you don't know. And it can be something you have control over, like such as being aware of Allah. I should always be aware of Allah, but I'm in a state of ghafla. I forgot about Allah for an hour, 2 hours, a day, whatever it is. So that's a ghafla, that is not a praiseworthy ghafla, but this is a less of a ghafla that he didn't know. And when you don't know, somebody has to tell you. Now the interesting is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not use the word jahilun, because jahil is a harsher word than ghafla. And look at the adab with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He didn't say you are ghafil. He said you are among the ghafilun. Means many people don't know and you are one of them. So this is also the way Allah addresses His messenger, saying the message but with adab. Allah is using adab, teaching us to use adab. How much adab we should have with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So as I said before, the word Hadha al-Quran is mentioned in this. Before it was mentioned as Kitab, so this book. Now starts the story. إذ قال يوسف لأبيه يا أبت إني رأيت أحد عشر كوكبا والشمس والقمر رأيتهم لي ساجدين. إذ قال, in what is meant by and remember. When the word id is used is when something happened, but what is meant is like when we start stories in English, how do we know once upon a time? When such and such thing happened. In a way, what's implied here is remember. Now think, قال Yusuf, when Yusuf said لأبيه, to his father, Ya abati. In the Arabic language, Ya abati is like, it's not like saying, oh my father, it's like endearment. Oh my dear father, oh my beloved father. You say it when you feel very close. You know, there are moments, he's a father, you love him, but there may be moments when you feel even closer. You say, Ya abati. Okay. Ya abati. So just imagine, let's say about 7-year-old kid comes to his father. And father may have many things going on. He's got a big family to support, and they were shepherds. Okay, big family to support, and this young boy comes to him, said, oh my father, inni ra'aytu, I have seen ahda ashra, 11 stars, washamsa wal qamar, I saw the sun and the moon. And then he uses the same word. So he says, I saw 11 stars, the sun and the moon. And then he says, Ra'aytuhum, and I saw them, li sajidin, prostrating to me. So he added that. So in other words, there are two parts to this dream. One, he sees them stationary. He identifies them as sun, moon, and stars. Is there anything unusual about this? Can the sun and moon appear together? What do you mean no? You see them sometimes. You see half the moon in the daytime. You see the sun here, the moon is there. Do you see stars with the sun?
Sun is a star.
11 stars. So there was something unusual about this. He's seeing the sun and he's seeing the stars and he's seeing the moon. So just there's something unusual going on here. Because you don't see, Venus is the first star that appears after sunset. As soon as it's set, that's the brightest one, it shows up, and then you see the second, third. Obviously, he saw enough, and they were clear enough that he was able to count them. So he saw them. He saw the sun and the moon, and he saw. And then as he's looking at them, he says, Araituhum, I saw them, li sajidin, doing sajda to me. He used the word sajda. Now, what is your concept of sajda? We know one sajda. You put your hands down, and you put your knees down, and you put your head in. Does the sun have hands, feet, and There's the moon or the stars. So what does it mean by sajda?
Obedience.
What do you think a child may have seen that would make him think of that? Perhaps if he saw the sun, the moon and stars come down together, and they come to the in front of his feet and they disappear there. Just like we see the sun setting and it goes. So he saw all of these. Now he didn't see it setting somewhere. He said, lead to me. To me means they came in front of me, all of them, and they disappeared there. That would be one way of sajda. Allahu alam what he saw. But these are things you have to think. We take the story, we've heard the story 100 times. Unka wo sajda kiya. What does it mean? So he probably saw something, but it was unusual. Now, when you've got kids, when something unusual happens, who do they go to first? Brothers, sisters, they tell them. Should I tell mom? Should I tell dad? Right? Generally, that's what they are. They first talk to their generation, most times. Unless something bad happens, then they might. Now, he did not go to his 11 brothers. He did not go to his mother. So this child had some special wisdom. He came to his father. He already knew my father is a prophet of Allah. So who would know better than my father? And yet it was striking enough dream that he wanted to tell him. It wasn't one of those random dreams that you saw and you forget in 2 minutes afterwards. He had all the details. And he came and he said this. It seems that even at that age, he understood the general meaning of this dream. He deciphered it. 11 stars. He said, I have 11 brothers. Sun and the moon, which represent the parents. So some of the Mufassirun have said the sun represents the father and the moon the mother, but the majority of scholars have said the sun represents the mother and the moon the father. Because ummuk, 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 your mother, your mother, your mother, then your father. Okay. That the mother's role is greater, but in this case the mother had apparently died, but so he had whoever else stepmothers, but he came to the father. Another thing to reflect on this is, what do the sun and the moon do? In this, obviously we know they represent, later on in the story we know they represented the parents and the brothers, the stars. So what do the sun and moon represent in general? What do?
Guiding.
They give us light.
Right. Showing you paths.
So when you lose your parents, when you lose your mother and your father, it is as if you have lost the light in your life. Because you go through a state of emotional darkness, no matter how old they were. And then it tells you, if you go into that darkness because you've lost your parents, look for the stars, because in the night you get guidance by looking at stars. You know, we have the major and the minor and North Star and all of that. So what are these stars? It tells us that we should connect with our relatives and with the friends of our parents, because those little lights would remind us of the nur that our parents were in our lives. So anyway, Yusuf alayhi salam sees this dream. It's an unusual dream, and I want you all afterwards, when you're lying down before you go to sleep, reflect on this. What must he have seen? Because there's so many unusual things about this dream. Just the fact, like I said, that the sun and stars were together, and then how did they do sajda and all? So he says, he does not go to anyone else, and he trusts his father with this dream. And he approaches him. In this, Ya Abati is telling us that they were alone. That's why that intimacy term, that they were alone. He could have told the dream to Yaqub alayhi salam and his brothers were sitting around. He didn't. Now what is the response of the father? Qala, Yaqub alayhi salam said, Ya bunay. So he reciprocated that intimate Ya Abati with Ya bunay. Oh my beloved son. Again, something who is very close to you, very dear to you. He said, Ya bunay. What's the first thing he tells him? He tells him something negative. La takhsus ru'yaka ala ikhwatika. Don't tell this dream to your brothers. He gives him a warning. Little child, he comes to the father, he gives him a warning. And he just doesn't stop there. Many times, as parents, what we do, we say, don't do this, and that's it. That's a command from on high. Father and mother have said, that's it. He explains to his young son why he's saying this. This is lessons in parenting. That we, first lesson is, always be available for your children to come to you and talk to you and discuss anything. And give them that attention. Treat them with the same kindness and gentleness and intimacy that they want. Pay attention. They're talking, I'm on my phone. They're talking, I'm busy. And yeah, what are you saying? I'm listening. No. He gave him one-on-one attention. This is teaching us adab with our children. Okay? Otherwise the child talks, knows my father is not listening, he leaves. Give them that. Then he explains. He said, the reason I'm saying this is فَيَكِيدُ لَكَ كَيْدًا, so that they don't make a plot against you. Yaqub alayhi salam listens to the narration of the dream. He interprets it. He also understands that this is about the brothers and about the parents. And understands that Yusuf has been received this dream. That means he is being selected by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for something special. That something special could have come to any of the 12. And the moment he declares it to his brother, the jealousy's indexes will go up and they will harm him. So he has fear for Yusuf alayhi salam. So he says, فَيَكِيدُ لَكَ كَيْدًا, lest they devise a plot against you. But then he adds another interesting thing. He's not saying, that also implies that perhaps those brothers didn't always treat him well. Because they were jealous, and we learn later, because they say, he gets favored by our father, he loves him, and we are this and we are this and we are strong, and he pays more attention, he loves them. So they had some jealousies, and he thought if this is revealed to them, they would really flip and harm him, which was right. That's what they did. They wanted to kill him actually. Then he says, Inna shaytana lil insani aduwwan mubin. Indeed, shaitan is an open enemy to humankind. So what has he done? This way he has protected the other 11 by saying they're not bad, but shaitan might give them these waswasas that they might do something bad against you. Okay. That is the adab with, that we learn from that is, when you see someone doing something bad, blame the shaitan. Don't say, look at him, he's doing this. So my God, shaitan has put this idea in him. Put the blame on shaitan. But when we do something wrong, put the blame on us. Don't say, shaitan has done this, I haven't done it. No, you take ownership of it. That is the other. I did it. Because later on it will come. The brothers will come, they will say, we did it. They don't come and say, shaitan made us do. Yet, he, in the end, ayah number 100, he says, shaitan made you do this. He still didn't blame them, he blamed shaitan. So this is also an lesson of adab, that when you see somebody doing, say, oh, do you know so-and-so does it? I said, yeah. Maybe shaitan has suggested this and we make dua against. So here he is protecting the others by saying shaitan may have put them up to this. So he fears that they will be harmed by his brothers. But there's another fear that some have reflected on, that he saw that Allah's creation is made to do sajda to Allah's creation. Stars, moon, anything is being made to do sajda in front of Yusuf alayhi salam, who is Allah's creation. Makhluk, doing sajda. And he puts it together that when a makhluk is made to do sajda to makhluk, there is a great trial coming. Because he remembers that the angels were made to do sajda to Adam alayhi salam, and then look what Adam alayhi salam had to go through after that. So he means that Allah has chosen to honor someone, then they will be put through such tests that nobody else can handle. So he figured that if this honor is being given to Yusuf, that the sun and moon are doing sajda to him, that means some heavy tests are coming down the line. So he had fear for him. You understand? Inshallah, we will stop there in the interest of Salah and take a few questions and continue from there, inshallah, in 2 weeks. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.